Growing up, I wanted to be a spy. I don't know if it was the cool car, the cool jetpack, or all of the honeys with all of the monies. There was nothing cooler in my mind than the dangerous, exciting lifestyle of a spy. Today, we are looking at an arcade game that takes all of these elements and makes sure they are shaken, not stirred. No, I'm not talking about James Pond. I'm talking about Sly Spy, the action-packed James Bond-influenced arcade game by Data East. What famous movie did this arcade game appear in? Let's find out as we investigate the history of Sly Spy. The year is 1989, and we are smack dab in the middle of the golden age of James Bond. The greatest portrayal of 007 since George Lazenby is taking place on the big screen. And this is a huge influence on Data East designer Makoto Kikuchi. In his previous arcade game, we had to find out if we were bad enough dudes to rescue the president. And in this game, you take on the role of Sly, a secret agent who has to stop the evil forces of the CWD, or Council for World Domination. After witnessing the apparent assassination of the president and the first lady, Sly boards a plane and attempts to take out the terrorists. Sly Spy, or Secret Agent as is known in other parts of the world, was released in the arcades in 1989 by Data East. This is a run and gun that sees you attempt to take out the bad guys with your martial arts action and bullet satisfaction. Your primary weapon is your gun, but if you run out of ammo, you can let the deadly kicks fly. You have an attack button and a jump button with 3 types of kicks available. The game takes place across 8 levels ranging from land to air to sea, with a mini-boss to fight at the end of each one. When the game starts up, you can enter a 3-digit numeric code, and yes, you can input 007, but it does not affect the gameplay at all. The first level sees you skydiving over Washington, D.C., taking out as many bad guys with your gun as you can. After you successfully touch down, the game turns into a traditional side-scroller in which you have to take out the various terrorists and sometimes dogs. Your ammunition is limited, but certain enemies will drop refills and other power-ups. These can also be found in the various crates you break. Also scattered throughout the game are pieces of a gun that just happens to be golden. Once all of the pieces are found, you are treated to an extremely powerful weapon. You can also pick up cans of pop or fizzy drinks as they are called in the manual, which look identical to the ones found in Bad Dudes. A wide variety of terrorists will attack, and they are absolutely relentless, so you have to be on your toes. The second level sees you hop aboard a motorcycle heading for an armored limousine. In your path are other motorcycle riding terrorists that you have to dispatch with your gun. You also have to contend with jetpack wielding enemies that makes you pop a wheelie to shoot them. They also drop plenty of bullets and power-ups though. Well, level 3 is another side-scroller in which you have to climb ladders taking care of the various enemies and even tigers. There is also a zip line you have to use. Once you get to the end of the level, there just happens to be a huge boss that looks exactly like Jaws from the James Bond movies. Level 4 is an underwater mission in which you have to take care of various frogmen and sharks. Level 5 is another side-scroller in which the main goal is to climb more ladders while avoiding all of the death traps. You have to rescue the damsel in distress while taking out multiple tigers. Level 6 takes place inside of an underground cave, which is the weapons depot for the CWD. The mini-boss of the level is clearly based on Oddjob and even throws his hat, just like in the movie. Level 7 is another underwater mission in which you are attempting to enter the base of the CWD. And finally, Level 8 places you inside the base where the enemies are as thick as mosquitoes. The final part of the level sees you climb to the top of a giant missile in which you have to fight each of the mini-bosses once again. Once you reach the top, you fight the final boss and stop the missile from launching. After completing this task, the president appears and gives you a nice thank you message. Sly is such a pimp that he takes all of the president's daughters in his car and drives away. It goes without saying that the James Bond influences are everywhere in this game. Everything from the tuxedo that Sly wears to the various bosses such as Odd Job and Jaws. Other notable references include the parachute, which is a nod to his Union Jack parachute, the scuba diving sections, the jetpacks, the golden gun, the skydiving scene, even the high score scene is reminiscent of the Living Daylights poster. If you look at the title screen of the PC versions, the character of Sly is clearly based off of Timothy Dalton. The gameplay is reminiscent of Rolling Thunder and Bad Dudes, but only with firearms. This is a good thing in my opinion because I loved Bad Dudes and always wanted a proper sequel. I know the arcade game Two Crude Dudes is supposedly a spinoff of Bad Dudes, but it just doesn't feel like it to me. In this game, I like the break in traditional gameplay with the scuba diving and skydiving sections included. Scattered throughout the game are posters and advertisements for other Data East games including Karnov, Chelnov, and Bad Dudes. In the movie RoboCop 2, RoboCop enters an arcade to confront Officer Duffy. While interrogating him, you can essentially see all kinds of Data East arcade hits, including Sly Spy, which gets front and center coverage. Speaking of RoboCop, you can see the corpse of RoboCop on level 7 who just happens to be missing his head. RoboCop was another Data East arcade game. Sly Spy was converted to a number of home systems by Software Creations and released by Ocean Software. Unfortunately, some are good and some are not so good. Let's start off with the 16-bit Amiga version. The graphics look fantastic, and they should, as they were ripped straight from the arcade board. If we were judging these versions based on still images alone, the Amiga version would win hands down. The problem is, when the game starts to move, things fall apart quicker than a bootleg toy from Mexico. The scrolling, while adequate, is not very smooth, and the speed of the game is not quite 100% when compared to the arcade original. The game also has a large, ugly status box which takes up 1/3 of the screen. I'm assuming this was done to keep the frame rate high, but even this doesn't do the trick. The music is very good though, and one of the highlights of this conversion. When I got this game as a kid, I thought it was really good, but looking back, it's only average. It does include all 8 levels in the entire arcade presentation. The game does play pretty well, even with only having one fire button. Let's go ahead and look at the other 16-bit conversion, which is the Atari ST version. This version as well had the arcade graphics ripped straight from the board, and it transferred over quite nicely with just a slight loss of color when compared to the Amiga. The game is slightly faster, but unfortunately the scrolling is not. However, on the motorcycle level we do get some nice parallax scrolling that was missing from the Amiga version. There is music, but unfortunately nowhere near as good as the Amiga. Content-wise, this is essentially identical to the Amiga. The playability is really good. Let's move it on down to the 8-bit Amstrad version. This is a good conversion if you don't mind playing without sound. The graphics are excellent with nice animation and excellent color. The speed of the game is very good and the scrolling is decent, although not quite as smooth as the Commodore 64. Content-wise, everything from the arcade game is here, including the introductory and in-between level sequences. The gameplay is nice, although a bit iffy on the collision detection. The Spectrum port is up next, and while it may be lacking in color, the overall detail of the game is great. The sprites are detailed and easily recognizable, and luckily enough, do not get lost in the background. The animation is fairly smooth, and the speed of the game is about 90% of the arcade original. The gameplay is nice and responsive whether you are playing with the keyboard or joystick. There is a nice intro tune, but during the game there is no sound. And finally, we come to the cream of the crop, the Commodore 64 version. This actually feels like you are playing the arcade game, although everything has been shrunk down just a bit. The sprites are a bit chunky when compared to the other versions, but the smooth scrolling and nice tight controls more than make up for it. Check out the parallax scrolling on the motorcycle level and especially the scuba diving level, and you'll see what I mean. This version also gets rid of the giant status bar at the bottom of the screen. The music was done by Jeff Fallon and sounds great. This is an absolute fantastic conversion, and the programmers should be commended. The game was released as part of Data East Arcade Classics on the Nintendo Wii in 2010. The game was simply titled Secret Agent and is running under emulation, so this is exactly the same version you would play in the arcades. In 2018, the game was released for the Nintendo Switch under the title Johnny Turbo's Arcade Sly Spy. Again, running under emulation, so this is the exact same game you would find in the arcades. And that brings us to the end of the history of Sly Spy. This is the perfect spoof of the James Bond franchise, but only set in the Bad Dudes universe. This works out fantastic and would essentially be the best James Bond game we would get until GoldenEye came out in 1995. Honestly, I don't know how Data East got away with putting in some of these references and not getting slapped with a lawsuit. If you are a fan of James Bond and love action games, then you owe it to yourself to try this out. You'll be glad you did. If you like my videos and want to support me on Patreon, please click the link below. Also, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. It's the only way my little channel can grow. Thank you so much for watching.